This might be a hot take, but a lot of white people are not happy. I'm Kylie, and I grew up in a very conservative area. I wanted to say that a lot of white people genuinely live some of the most miserable and isolated lives that you could even imagine. I think there are 3 reasons for this. The first is that there's just a general idea of just hyper-individualism and hoarding of resources. A lot of them are extremely stingy, don't tip well, and also don't donate to local charities. They're very isolated, and what few friends they have, their connection is built upon shared bigotry, which is obviously not a strong connection. Number 2, a lot of white people feel a sense of emptiness. They have the job, the car, the career, the kids, the Bible, but they don't feel that sense of fulfillment. I think it's because the subliminal messaging that white people get from birth is that they're so much better than everybody else, and once you're in that sort of position, you will not allow yourself to open up to other people and opportunities that would genuinely bring you joy and fulfillment. And the third reason is that a lot of white people genuinely feel like equality is the oppression of white people. That means other people getting rights means that some of ours get taken away somehow, which obviously isn't true, and so is the hyper-competitive nature of being white in America.
The majority of school blank and mass blank that are happening across this country are being committed by white boys. So let me ask you this. If you're a parent, white women, what are we doing? Because this year, in April, I got married, and in doing so, became a bonus mom of 2 beautiful little boys. And I have to tell you, every day we're combating messaging. Every day we're working on sharing emotions, expressing anger. We're working on things as parents to ensure that we are raising emotionally healthy, mature, communicative young men in the future. So I'm really concerned that that's not happening. What I'm understanding is that yes, this is 100% a pew-pew access to pew-pew problem, but as a culture, we are raising violent human beings. The overexposure and glorification of violence in our households has to stop. You have got to get a hold of what we are showing, teaching, exposing our children to, and being better, more present parents, because this is a problem in white households. So if we are white parents, we have to do something about it.
You know what the real mental health crisis in America is? It ain't what they're telling you, by the way. While everybody is pointing fingers at immigrants, trans folks, black communities, talking about culture problems and broken homes, there is one demographic that's been conveniently left out of the mental health conversation. The same demographic that's committed 84% of gun violence in this country. The same demographic that built an entire economic system on the backs of enslaved people and then got mad when those people wanted to be free. We are not talking about mental health. We are talking about white supremacy, and it's eating America from the inside out, including the people who benefit from it the most. See, here's what they don't want you to understand. You can't build your entire identity on domination and expect to find peace. That's not how the human soul works, and the numbers have never lied. So guys, I want you to buckle up. We are about to have the conversation America's been avoiding for 400 good years. I'll be back.
White men are the mental health problem in this country. Jim Crow, white men. Slavery, white men. Segregation, white men. Concentration camps for Asian Americans in the late 30s and early 40s. 1,800 people died. How many black people were hung from trees? 8,000. Let me guess. Oh yeah, once again, white men. The gun violence? 98% are men. 84% are white men, U.S. citizens. I see a trend. How about the Middle Passage where 1.2 African Americans died? Oh yeah, once again, white men. Why was the Second Amendment written? Let me think. So black people couldn't have their freedoms. So the white men could once again control them. Who's in the White House? An adjudicated rapist, convicted felon white man. Wow, I see a trend. But somehow Americans are just begging to blame a trans person, a non-white person. See, what happened to George Floyd is symbolic of what's happening in this country. The white man putting his knee on the neck of a non-white person and sitting there in broad daylight with the balls to say, who's going to stop me? And that's what we're seeing right now. So that's the question that we need to ask ourselves as a fucking country. Who's going to stop them? Because I'm just one person here. Now, I don't know about you, but I got friends and family that are sitting behind the white privilege, and I want nothing to do with them. Not because of who they are, because of their lack of action. Martin Luther King said, history is going to remember not the people that did bad things, but the good people that stood by and did nothing. Because once again, the white man is hiding behind their privilege while everybody else is getting treated like absolute fucking garbage. Because it doesn't affect me. You don't even want to go on a general strike to stop fascism. Oh, I can't work. Oh, I got a job. White man is the mental health crisis in the United States of America. It has been since day one. When you look at the majority of them, what do you see? A bunch of insecure little wannabe alpha males with small penises that need big trucks and guns to feel like a real man. That's the real problem, is toxic masculinity. That the white man feels unable to shit on everyone's rights just because of how they look. It's ironic, isn't it, that they demonize black people because they're black on the outside, and yet their hearts are black on the inside. Isn't that ironic? And every single time we see a mass shooting, they're just salivating on the white supremacist red hatters to say, oh my gosh, it was an immigrant, it was a trans person, it was a gay people. 84% of gun violence is white men. But when it happens, like at the church the other day, what happens? Oh, thoughts and prayers. But what happened with the racist podcaster? Oh, they were just dying for it to be somebody on the left so they can just blame somebody else. And a white man. The Catholic, the church yesterday, a white man, a white man, a white man, a white man, a white man. Ahmaud Arbery, guess what? 3 white men that chased out a black guy. Breonna Taylor, oh, a white cop. Again, and again, and again, and again, and again. It's the same demographic. White men are the problem in this fucking country. And until we address the real mental health epidemic, which is white supremacy, built on white men controlling people, because that's how this country was designed. For 21-year-old land-owning white men to shit on everybody else. This country was designed to benefit my demographic, and that is not okay. That is the original sin of this country. And until we address it, we will never be a great country, and we haven't been a great country. And if you don't like that, then you can ship.
Can we talk about how miserable white people are for a second? Like, you know that white people are miserable, right? Like, have you ever looked a white person in the eye, even if they're like a big mental health person? You just look deep down and you're like, brother, you are not happy at all. And truly, it breaks my heart. But one reason, I think, one of the main reasons that a lot of white people, a lot of us are really unhappy and miserable is because we lack internal congruence. Now, congruence is a concept we learned early in grad school to help people heal. And congruence is basically internal alignment. Values and actions are on the same page, right? Like, we accept every part of ourselves. We feel peace, security in who we are. Congruence. And no matter how hard you try, you can never find internal congruence if you're not congruent with the world around you. If you're not understanding what's real and seeing reality and affirming what's true. So like white people who deny patriarchy and capitalism's negative effect and oppression of the world and genocide that's happening around the world, like that's incongruent with reality. That is going to have an effect on us internally. Because to deny what's happening in real time, we have to deny certain parts of us, certain emotions, certain thoughts that come up. And the more we run for that, the more incongruent and separate we feel, the more dissonance that comes, the more miserable we are. And a lot of times we're not actually dealing with our own pain and our own reality because we're all suffering under capitalism and white supremacy. Like, it affects us different ways in intersectionality, but like it affects us white people too. You don't think a stormtrooper in the fucking Star Wars movies hates his life? You don't think he hates being bossed around all the time? You don't think poor white people living in the Empire, like in a city walls, like in a Game of Thrones, like you don't think that they're miserable under it, even though they're not miserable the most? To be congruent inside, to not be miserable anymore, it takes accepting the realities of the world, seeing how those toxic systems affect us, and then moving to actually be congruent. Because deep down, humanity has goodness at its center. So yeah, white people, we're miserable because we're not congruent, because we're denying the realities of the world, and thus denying ourselves.
Why have white Americans been afraid to start or celebrate White History Month?
Oh, there's so many reasons, but really I think it starts in the public schools when we're little. We've just really been conditioned into this kind of suicidal tendency, culturally suicidal tendency of like hating ourselves. And so most white people that hear anything positive about white culture, history, or the white race immediately kind of have this reflexive reaction of negativity. We've been really shamed as a race and a people to not appreciate our own heritage and be able to talk about that and to talk about being proud or happy or content with our ancestors and our culture and where we come from and what we've done as a people.
Allow me to tell you something that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. But uncomfortable is exactly where growth happens. So we're going there today. The United States has a mental health crisis, but it's not the one you've been sold. It's not about depression rates or anxiety disorders, though those are real and valid, yes. The crisis I'm talking about is structural. It's ancestral, it's ideological, and it disproportionately affects one group, white men, specifically white men who've built their entire sense of self on foundation that was always destined to crumble. And here are some facts that should make you pause. 98% of gun violence perpetrators in America are men, and 4% of those are white men who are US citizens. When we look at mass shootings, the ones that terrorize schools, churches, grocery stores, and the overwhelming majority are committed by white boys and white men. Not even immigrants, not the people they want you to fear, not the communities they want you to blame. From slavery to Jim Crow to segregation to redlining to mass incarceration, every single one of these systems was designed, implemented, and defended by white men. And every time we try to dismantle these systems, who shows up with guns, with rage, with this existential terror that equality somewhat equals to their oppression? The same demographic I'm talking about. And I'm not talking about individual white men. I know plenty of white men who are doing the work, who understand what we are talking about here. This is about a system, an ideology, a construct called whiteness that was built for one purpose: supremacy and dominance. Let me introduce you to a concept. Let us talk about internal congruence. It's when your values align with your actions, when what you believe matches how you move through the world, when you can look at yourself in the mirror and feel peace, not because life is perfect, but because you're living in alignment with the truth. You cannot have internal congruence when you're denying reality. And that's the trap so many white Americans are caught in right now. They've been caught. They've been taught through education, through media, through family dinner conversations that their skin color makes them inherently superior, more deserving, more intelligent, more capable, like it was the default. But then they step into the real world. They see black presidents, Latina Supreme Court justices, Asian tech innovators, African immigrants thriving despite every obstacle. They see people who are supposedly beneath them, not just surviving but excelling. And that creates a cognitive dissonance so profound it fractures the soul. Because now they have to choose. Do I accept that everything I was taught was a lie? Or do I double down, get angrier, buy more guns, wave more flags, scream louder about how they're taking over? Most choose the latter, and that choice becomes without cost, misery by there. You cannot deny the reality of systemic oppression, that genocide, the exploitation, the ongoing harm, without also denying parts of yourself. The empathy, the concerns, the emotions that say this is not right. The more you run from truth, the more separated you become from your own humanity. And that separation, that's where the misery lives. Okay, let me tell you what's the tragic here. Most white people they didn't create these systems. They inherited them. They were handed a worldview that said you're on top because you deserve to be on top. They were given privileges they didn't ask for, but benefited from them anyway. And now they're carrying the burden of their ancestors' choices. Slavery was not just economically wrong. It was spiritually catastrophic for everyone involved. You cannot torture, rape, and murder human beings for 400 years and expect that karma just to evaporate. That pain gets passed down. The trauma becomes intergenerational. It doesn't just affect the descendants of the enslaved. It affects the descendants of the enslavers too. But here's the difference. Black folks have had to do the work of healing from that trauma while simultaneously fighting systems designed to keep them oppressed. They've had to build their culture, community, resilience, joy, in spite of everything. Many white people have been running from accountability, and you cannot heal what you want to acknowledge. Instead of saying, my ancestors did horrific things and I benefit from systems they built on their violence, there is defensiveness, denial. That was a long time ago. I never allowed slaves. Why should I do that? But that's how now generational healing works. That's not how they work. You don't get to inherit the house, the land, the wealth, the access, then refuse to inherit the responsibility. There is a phrase that's been circulated. When you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And that's exactly what's happening. So many white Americans generally believe that black people, immigrants, LGBTQ folks, gaining rights means their rights are being taken away. That's the zero-sum thinking that white supremacy has cultivated. It's the reason reparations conversations make people furious. It's the reason DI initiatives trigger rage. It's the reason a black person in a position of power is seen as a threat. Because if we are all equal, if the playing field is level, if merit actually matters more than melanin, then what was all that domination for? What was the point of all that suffering inflicted? And here's where misery deepens. When your identity is built on being better than what happens when the hierarchy crumbles, who are you? Who you're not superior? What do you have to offer if you cannot rely on systemic advantages? That existential crisis is real. And instead of doing the internal work to rebuild identity on something meaningful, character, values, contributions, there is this desperate clinging to a sinking ship. Let me bring this home with something personal. I've traveled across Diaspora, Africa, Caribbean, Europe, back to the States, And one thing I've noticed, black culture, African culture, we have depth. We have ancestry we can trace. We have languages, cuisine, music, spirituality that survive the Middle Passage. Whiteness, as a construct, it has none of that, because whiteness is not Irish culture or Italian culture or German culture. Whiteness is a political category created to justify domination. It is a club that certain Europeans were allowed into once they agreed to oppress black and brown people. So when you strip away that supremacy, what's left? What's the culture beyond domination? That emptiness is why so many white Americans feel hollow despite having material success. The job, the house, the car, the nuclear family, all the markers they were told would bring happiness, and still there is this gnawing sense that something is missing. Because connection is missing, community is missing, accountability is missing, truth is missing. And there is something that is giving me hope. I've seen white people do the work. I've seen them sit in the discomfort, acknowledge the harm, take accountability, and emerge more whole. Because here's the truth that they don't want you to know. Liberation is not just for the oppressed. The oppressor needs liberation too. When you stop needing to dominate to feel secure, you can finally breathe. When you stop defending indefensible systems, you can finally rest. When you accept that your ancestors were wrong and commit to being different, you can finally find peace. But that requires courage. It requires humility. It requires looking at history, not the sanitized version they taught in school, but the real version, and saying, never again. The real mental health crisis in America is not depression or anxiety. It's white supremacy. It's toxic masculinity that says you need guns and trucks to be a man. It's the ideology that says your worth is tied to someone else's oppression. And until we name it, until we address it, until white Americans, particularly white men, do the internal work of dismantling supremacy in their own hearts, this country will never heal. The good news, it's possible. Healing is always possible, but it starts with truth. It starts with accountability. It starts with choosing congruence over comfort. You can inherit generational wealth or generational wisdom. You can inherit privilege or you can inherit purpose, but you cannot inherit supremacy without also inheriting the misery that comes with it. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. For my white brothers and sisters, this is the challenge. It's either you take accountability and responsibility, or you keep on languishing into depression and anxiety, and the mental health crisis will not be far away from you. It will be there with you like the scent of your perfume. Thank you. I hope to see you in my next video.